Congressman Paulina Luna, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for being here. Very happy to be back.
Yeah, so we'd love to kind of kick off with hearing about what your first few months in Congress have been like.
It's been wild. It's definitely a learning curve. When I first got up here, you have your opinions from outside, but when you see inside how things are actually going down, it brings a whole new perspective. So definitely a lot of kind of baptism by fire, but totally worth it. And then obviously I'm on two of probably the most lively committees, so Natural Resources and then House Oversight that's conducting the investigation. So you'll see like the press has been kind of attacking me from the left-wing perspective, but I just ignore them.
Yeah. What are your, biggest aims and projects that you want to get done this year?
So one of the main reasons, there's two main reasons why I ran for office. One was what was happening at the southern border with human trafficking. So basically the border security and immigration debate. And then the number two thing was what's happening with big tech. Mm-hmm. So in the last election cycle, I actually used my campaign. We sued Twitter, and this is Twitter 1.0. Before all the information came out about censorship, we were flagging it. I was not the only candidate in the country that was censored. However, we had a pretty strong case as to why the algorithms were affecting and directly impacting our race. And ultimately, the FEC, the Federal Elections Commission, said that it was not their job to enforce election law, and that was the official response to our campaign. And ultimately, that Congress needed to update those laws. So it's really good that I won because I want to work on election law reform, but then also to going into the topic of big tech and really where privacy, First Amendment, and then also to these utilities are now considered, I think, fair use platforms, public utilities. So getting into that debate, understanding it from, I think, a perspective of not only someone that grew up using social media, understands the back end algorithms, but then from a constitutional perspective, that's probably going to be my biggest fight in Washington, probably of my career.
Wow. So you mentioned briefly that you've gotten some media criticisms. Can you share a little more about that, what that's been like? You're young, you're a former service member, right? You are, you lived near the border. You've been telling us about these different attacks that you experienced. Shouldn't you be someone that they're excited about, that they want to talk to?
They hate people like myself and Byron Donalds and any other conservative minority member of Congress. Mind you, I'm the first Mexican-American woman to be elected to the House from the state of Florida. And I flipped my seat. I'm pretty sure I'm the first minority woman to serve in that seat in Florida. So Obviously there's a lot of firsts there, but they don't want to highlight that because my story and my upbringing actually breaks through the whole concept of identity politics, where they say if you are a minority, you have to vote a certain type of way. And ultimately, if you don't vote that type of way, you're supposed to embrace this victimhood mentality. And I don't. And so it's interesting because every time I go up, I could be wearing a pin on my House Oversight hearing, and they will focus on that. It's like every time I actually leave those hearings, I just anticipate that someone's going to say something to try to use it to either get a viral clip or to have a media response. But it's interesting because I realize that the best way to really sanitize that press or the attacking press that's not being truthful is with the truth. And so my comms director has been really great about using Twitter especially to just immediately kill shot some of these articles. But for example, yesterday when we were on a hearing for oversight, I made a statement. I am literally the only member of Congress, and this is true, that has survived an armed robbery, that literally had a gang shooting on their school campus, that had a cousin, and I remember going to her funeral when I was little, that was unfortunately murdered. And then ultimately my husband was later on shot in Afghanistan, and I literally survived a home invasion when I was stationed in Missouri. No one else has gone through that, and I'm not sitting here advocating for gun control. And I said that on the panel yesterday, and they literally were trying to take my words out of context and say that I was the only member of Congress that experienced gun violence. Like, that wasn't even the point of the argument. The point is that why are you trying to limit an American's ability to rightfully own firearms because bad things happen? Bad people are always going to get guns. Having gone through that experience, I never once thought it was a firearm that was an issue. So they'll try to spin that, and then we just obviously took the clips and I reiterated my point and put it back at them.
There you go. And in terms of your peers in Congress, what is it like being a young conservative congresswoman when your peers are people like Ocasio-Cortez? What's that experience been like?
I definitely think there's a lot of, obviously, probably the only thing that we have in common is that we're women and that we're of Hispanic origins. But, it's interesting because I think I'm actually one of the youngest Republican members of Congress that's a woman.
Right.
And it's polar opposites. So from my perspective, I see a majority of the conference is a lot older. So it's interesting that, the younger people, you either have them as really, really left-leaning or very conservative. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's kind of a counterbalance. But what I would love to see is more young people getting involved in politics. Right. Because what I see up here, and I love, everyone has their different experiences and reasons for being up here, but there can be fatigue. And when you're fatigued and you've been kind of at the job for a long time, I think that there's a certain fire that's lost in that. And so obviously I'm for term limits, and obviously I don't want to do this. You will not catch me up here at 60 years old doing this. There's no way. But while I am here, I'm going to make it worthwhile. And I just tell everyone, whether you're getting involved at local levels, school board, city council, mayor, commissioner, whatever it is, or federal, do it while you're young. You can find a way. A lot of people are concerned, well, how, where's the financial stability? I worked and I campaigned the whole time during my second election. And so you can do it. It's a lot of work.
What do you want to be doing when you're 60 years old?
When I'm 60 years old, I'll probably be on a beach in Florida with a coconut, no social media, retired.
That sounds like fun.
Yes, that is my goal. And I think the more that I'm in this job, the more that I realize, you need your downtime with your family. And so sometimes I'll just leave my phone at home while I go to Target. My husband's like, wow, who are you?
Yeah, that's brave.
Yeah.
So switching gears a little bit to something more sobering, I know that you've been meeting with the progressive anti-abortion uprising over the past, couple of days. And it's been about a year since they found these babies outside an abortion clinic in Boggy Bottom. We know that the mayor has basically held on to this investigation for a year. We don't know whether there were autopsies performed. Sounds like there aren't. Media can't get any inquiries answered. What's your take on this whole situation, and why don't we know how these babies were killed?
So I remember when I saw the video come out, and it was, I think, on Instagram, and I ended up reposting it. And so my comms director had flagged that the group wanted to meet with me, and any pro-life group I will meet with, that's one of something that I'm no matter what passionate about, whether or not I'm in office. But I really wanted to meet with them specifically because I remember that video, and I actually met the woman that was responsible for that discovery. She was the one that asked the individual that was collecting the medical waste, i.e. some of these remains, if they could take the box. Box. And when you hear those stories, and then they actually gave me photos, and you're looking through, there's no excuse. They call it late-term abortion. These babies were born alive and they were left to die. One of the babies was born completely encompassed in the amniotic sac and drowned in its own amniotic fluid. Let's say that you are pro-abortion, right? That's still a cruel and unusual way to die. And there's laws and statutes that say that you cannot allow cruel and unusual punishment. So even if that's your argument, how can you still argue to allow this to happen? Because of the way in which it was done. Another baby, from what I was told and from what I saw, was born completely no issues, no markings on the body, intact, and they left the baby to die. So yes, there needs to be an investigation done. One thing that the organization told me is that they're having issues locating a pathologist that will actually conduct the autopsy. And I think that that's probably the case, because if you're here and they do that, that's a career ender. Mm-hmm. And so we're probably going to have to find someone to come in and volunteer to do it on their own time. But I hope that maybe you guys can help locate someone like that, or maybe someone sees this and that they contact our office, because that has to be done. These babies have still not yet been buried. And I think what's even more sad is that I'm sure that the women that did have those abortions, maybe they have seen the footage, but they'll never know if that was their child or not.
Oh gosh, that's horrible. I hadn't even thought about it. There might be women out there that are wondering, oh my gosh, was that my baby?
Yeah, if they saw the images, and I'm sure if it was in the local area. This clinic, from what I gather, is actually preying on a lot of minority women that are financially struggling, and there's other resources out there and available for if you can't financially afford it. I know in Florida, we have pro-life centers that will actually have you stay with them if you cannot financially afford to be on your own. They were telling us also a story of a woman who was going to have an abortion at 7 months because she couldn't afford rent for that month, and they actually put together the money and they had her save her baby. But that, when you see those photos, it's it's a different argument.
Right.
And when we were in hearing again yesterday, and you have Democrats saying that they care about children's lives and that's why we need, to fight with gun control. And then I showed them the photos. I'm like, well, these are children and you're not saying anything about this or failing to acknowledge that. They had nothing to say.
They had nothing to say. And that was a really amazing moment there where you held up these photos of these babies, which they're pretty graphic. I mean, I know on social media they were censored, I think, and then there's lots of debate about whether they should be seen or not. But to hold those up in a major hearing, did you hear any backlash from your colleagues?
Yeah, you could hear people like murmur. It was uncomfortable, and you could hear that. But they should be uncomfortable because as Congress, we have something called Homestead Rule. We ultimately have final authority on, and we can get involved in the laws that are passed here. And yet this is happening. Another really disturbing thing is that medical waste facility that was collecting this medical waste was then bringing it to the city of Baltimore to be burned for alternative energy. Yeah. That's sick.
Now that waste company, I should say, I've repeatedly asked them, they claim that this never happened and that the women were lying.
Of course. Women are always painted as liars and crazy when they try to discredit you. That's like the blanket reproach. It's so sexist.
Liars and crazy. Yeah, and we know that the boxes were covered in their labeling. We have pictures and videos showing that. So that's wild. Back to that hearing, though, when you held up those pictures, did you have concerns that people would write you off as a crazy pro-lifer?
No. And even if they did, I don't care. That is, you can't say that it's a crazy pro-lifer when it's literally like a full-term baby that's dead. Like, that's not. And the interesting part is that they had no response to it. Yeah. Like, it was that powerful that they had no response.
So what do you want to see happen with the babies?
One, we need to find a pathologist. I want to get them buried. Two, I want to ensure that doctor is held accountable, but that can't be done until the autopsies are done. And three, to my understanding, this doctor is also under investigation for killing a woman in a botched abortion. So why is he still allowed to practice? That's Dr. Mengele at its best. I mean, this guy's not a legitimate doctor. He's a really evil person. And again, going back to the whole argument of even if you are pro-abortion, this is cruel and unusual to let a baby suffocate in its amniotic fluid.
Right. Well, I'm excited to see if you get answers on that. We'll be asking as well. I wanted to also touch base on another hearing that took place yesterday, the TikTok hearings. Can you give us your take? Should TikTok be banned? What's your TikTok take?
Yeah, so I would have loved to be on that hearing. I've been one of the biggest, I think, voices and advocates to ban TikTok, not just before I was, or not just since I'm elected, but before as well. TikTok this is a national security issue. I was on Fox yesterday and they're asking us, well, what about the young people that are using it that are going to be angry? And I say, this is where you have a decision. It's either going to be the right thing to do or the decision that's going to feel good. And the feel good decision would say, no, it's fine. Just, it's your privacy. But this is not just about your privacy. This is a national security issue because this app is gathering information on, if you have the app on your phone, your contacts, who you're talking to. And they're literally at the same time using AI to brainwash and target our young people into doing stuff that really is not only impacting and infecting our culture, but dumbing down America. They would never show that information to young Chinese people over there. And they would never allow an American-owned app to do that. So it's going to be a really, really interesting debate. I've sponsored a bill to ban TikTok outright, and I hope that goes through. And frankly, I don't feel bad about that because this is the Communist Chinese Party. They're not our friends. They're using this. They're pretending it's done in a good intention, but it's not. And the more that we allow them to infect our society, the more that they win, and we can't have that happen.
Right. And kind of similar to the question you just said that you got on television yesterday, I've seen people saying that, oh, conservatives are so stupid, they're alienating Gen Z. Should we be worried about hurting Gen Z's feelings when it comes to issues like TikTok?
No, because Gen Z will find another way and use other social media platforms. And I'm sorry, but Gen Z on TikTok, it's predominantly people dancing and doing different challenges that are actually hurting themselves. So if anything, it's like us actually protecting them. And, when you have people that say, my number one job is to be an influencer, you can be whatever you want. You don't need that app and that platform to do it.
Right. Well, moving on a little bit, we know that you were a service member. You served in the Air Force, right? Your husband is also a service member. Can you weigh in for us on the war in Ukraine? Give us your take. What is your thoughts on the current moment?
I have been very vocal in that, one, we need to stop what we're doing in Ukraine altogether. There's a different point when, or I guess the question would be, at what point does another country perceive what we're doing as an act of war? We're sending tanks, we're sending missiles, we're sending firearms. And my real question is, how does that affect the United States, right? You have Zelensky, who very famously went on an interview, and he said that if we do not continue to send aid, that we will end up sending our sons and daughters and they will die. And to have a foreign entity, a foreign government say that, make that demand, and then to have politicians so blindly and I think ignorantly continue to support without any oversight, without any accountability. That is not what our job is. Our only obligation is to U.S. citizens here and to service members here. And I'm not in the business of endless wars. And I realize that that's a very unpopular position in Washington. But if you look at who's donating to me, it's not some of these warmongering companies. And so I think that I will continue to be vocal on that. And I do think that we're starting to see a little bit of a fizzle out in regards to the support for Ukraine. I know that Kevin McCarthy was quoted saying no more blank checks for Ukraine. And I support that position. But it was interesting. I did have some young Ukrainian students that actually came to my office from a Ukrainian school to ask me why I don't support the war over there. And I put it in perspective to them. And after we were done talking, they realized that this is not just about Ukraine. This is about the United States. And right now, Russia is aligning with China. We're seeing that. They've been aligned, but they're more, I think, cavalier about it. China's aligned with Iran. And the world does not respect us. And so if we do not pull back our military involvement and really focus on issues at home, I do believe that this could get us pulled into an actual kinetic conflict, maybe even World War III.
And you mentioned Iran. I know we just heard from the Pentagon that I believe a U.S. contractor was killed and 5 service members were wounded in a drone strike in northeast Syria yesterday. What is your take on the situation there? I think I heard we have, 900?
We have about 900 service members. I just last session when we were up here was with Matt Gaetz arguing on why we should withdraw troops from Syria. We had about a quarter bipartisan support for withdrawing of troops from Syria, but it pisses me off. Sorry to say that, but it really ticks me off when you hear people say that if we don't fight them there, they're going to come here. If that's the argument, then it's impossible, because that ideology, we're talking about a long-term conflict that has nothing to do with the United States, which, by the way, Matt Gaetz so brilliantly pointed out that the United States has been on both sides. So why are we still there putting these troops in harm's way for what? You know, the president of Syria is best friends with Putin. They don't even want us there. So why are we really there right now? And I think that whole argument is just completely flawed. And as you saw, and as we stated just weeks ago, you know, people are going to get hurt, and you're seeing that right now. And so for that service member, you know, I've been in the position where I've gotten a phone call to say, hey, you know, your husband's been shot, and I know what that's like. But in this case, they got a knock at the door to tell them that their service member wasn't coming home. So we're praying for the family. But this is exactly why we take the positions that we stand. You know, when you're in this position, you are accepting in that instance that you are responsible and that you have blood on your hands if those people get hurt. And so my only focus is that when I die, I can answer for every one of my decisions to God, because that's all that really matters. And that's why I'm so strong on this position. All
right. Now, one of the biggest news topics that we've been hearing this week and last week is whether or not a New York City grand jury will criminally charge Donald Trump. Do you think this will happen? And if it does, how should Americans respond?
It's extremely disturbing that they even tried to. But I really think that, especially with what happened just a few days ago with Stormy Daniels posting the letter that said that she actually never had an affair with President Trump, from her attorney saying that it was authentic and legitimate, TMZ reported on it, where's their case? So I think now you're seeing a Soros DA who cooked up charges that were outside of the statute of limitation, completely illegal. It's another just, I think, feather in his cap on him actually having the truth on his side. They can't do that. It's not constitutional, but the fact that they are is alarming. So moving forward, I think that it's important to note that regardless of your political affiliation, Okay, I think Chris Rock famously said, you guys want to arrest Trump? It would be like arresting Tupac. And Elon Musk said, you guys arrest Trump, he's going to win in a landslide. I think he's still going to win. But I will also say that these people are more independent libertarian leaning, and they're making those comments. And it's important to note that a majority of America outside of Washington, D.C. is horrified at what happened to Donald Trump, and rightfully so.
And last question, I noticed you said that he will win again. So he's been making a lot of comments this week about Ron DeSantis. What do you think about these kind of personal attacks, and how do you feel about that situation in general?
You know, I've already endorsed President Trump for 2024, and I stand by that endorsement. I like Governor DeSantis. I think he's great. He's my governor, and I'm going to continue to support him as governor. But ultimately, the reason why I chose to endorse President Trump is because right now we need strong leadership. And, you know, primaries in general can be nasty. I know I've gone through 2 of them, and they're not fun. But I do think that at this point in time, we need to coalesce around one leader, and one leader that is not afraid of making those tough decisions once they get back to Washington, because of the fact that when you are worried about re-election, right, if you're worried about a second term, you will not be as cutthroat with foreign policy, and that's what we need right now. And so that's why I've chosen to throw my weight behind President Trump.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you here and to hear your insights.
Thank you very much.